Education's one of those things that everyone's an expert in. You know,
Yeah.
Fred down the pub,
Yeah.
and Mary in the pub, whatever it is. They're all experts. They
Yeah.
all know, oh, that's because they're bloody this, and
Yeah.
whatever. And they all have an
I
opinion.
mean, it would be nice to have an education secretary who'd actually been a head teacher. We've had a series of education ministers who, quite frankly, aren't really in touch with reality, are they?
A parent has a really, in my view, really important role in the education of their children. If they don't, they might be looking after them forever anyway.
They're a school that's been there for years and years and years and years with a really great reputation, really well thought of. Why have they not got these links so that at the end of the year they say, I've got 3 boys that are going to be brilliant plumbers. I've got 3 boys that are going to... Because they don't value it.
Welcome back to Success is a System. I'm Mike Greene and I'm here today with Caron Johnson. Caron Johnson is the executive head of the Rowans Academy, and we're going to learn all about that. I want to talk about education today because it comes up so much in all of the success stories or the lives of the people we talk to. A good education can be such a kickstart, such a springboard to success in whatever people want to do. A challenged education can make it so much harder to make any move. And yet so many successful people come from a challenged background and come from a fairly limited education. Now, I'm going to ask Caron about it because I'm going to get it completely wrong. But tell us about the Rowans, and it's an alternative provision school,
Yeah.
which we used to call special schools or whatever it was. But tell us what it means and why we need these schools.
Okay, so there is a difference between a special school and an alternative provision. Alternative provisions were your pupil referral units, which there still are some that are local authority maintained. So alternative provision academies are for young people who don't have an education, health and care plan necessarily, although we do have some in our schools that do have them. So they would access special education.
Yeah.
Alternative provision is for children who are either at risk of exclusion or have been excluded. So they would either have been permanently excluded, so it's a second chance, or it's a short stay turnaround provision where we have young people in, we do some phenomenal work with them, and then we hopefully push them back out into a mainstream system, which sounds like it's easy, but actually that's really difficult to do.
Trouble is, everything you say, I'm going to find interesting because I am so passionate about education. But in a way, it's a success if they're not with you long then.
Absolutely.
And yet, for them, it might be where they want to be
100%.
because suddenly they're being understood, they're being listened to,
Yeah.
they're being supported. And is it not hard to then force them back into mainstream education?
So that's the real problem that all alternative provisions face, is that we constantly battle and struggle with, is it a point in time that a child needs that support? So there could have been a family bereavement or some form of immediate trauma that they need that support only momentarily, so in the moment, or is it longer term because the needs that they've got aren't being met or can't be met in more of a mainstream setting? And then that's the conversation of, do they need an education, health and care plan to access special provision, or is alternative provision where they need to be for that moment, and can they go back? There are some young people who will be in alternative provision for the rest of their schooling, and that's a positive thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Yeah. No, and I can see that. I mean, I'm at a slightly different educational position. My brother and sister both got expelled or excluded, and both for various reasons. But my daughter chose to go down. She was an excelling student, chose to go down. It's the best thing that ever happened. So sometimes being in an environment that might be seen as a penalty or punishment for some is the perfect ground for others to blossom and be all they can be. And it's a hard thing, I guess, to choose that. But I want to go back in time. I want to go, always it's how did someone become a plumber? How did someone become a dentist? How did someone become a teacher? How did someone become a super teacher or whatever we want to get to? What was your upbringing like? Brothers, sisters, mum, dad, silver spoon, not silver spoon? What was it like? Tell us about Caron growing up.
Okay, so I've got one sister who's 5 years older than me, and we're very close. We were single parent family, so dad left when I think I was 3, came back, and I think he went again when I was 5. So brought up by a very strong mum, and I can't stress that enough when I say very strong. Some might say scary. And then stepdad came along with his children. That wasn't a particularly positive blended family experience. Now my mum and stepdad are still together, and my stepdad is who I call dad. We're very close. I wouldn't say it wasn't an awful upbringing. It was difficult, difficult relationship with my real dad, who I don't have a relationship with at all now. Didn't have much money. Didn't have any possessions. Remember not having the clothes everyone had, and going on the holidays people went on. But I wouldn't say that we were particularly hard done by. I think we learned how to manage ourselves and sort of stick up for ourselves and be who we wanted to be. But that was because I think we had such a strong female role model in our lives.
Yeah, no, exactly the same. My dad left when I was 4. He was just a sperm donor. He was never a father. But what about education? Was it a good experience, bad experience, good school, bad school?
I live in Kent, and it's a selective system. So back when I was at school, it was something called the 13 plus, which you didn't take an exam as such, but you did exams within the school, and you got selected as whether you were good enough to go to grammar school.
And so grammar school still
started
exists.
at 13. So you went to a normal school up until the age of 13, and then in year 9 you swapped. I wasn't good enough, so I stayed in the local school, which was rough. It was, there were lots of fights and lots of, and there were lots of children who were in class and disruptive and didn't really want to learn. And I think I was probably average, run of the mill.
Can you remember what it felt like to not be good enough?
Oh God, yeah, it's awful.
Yeah. And yet we still test kids so often these days.
And I still live in Kent, and my 3 children, I've fallen into the system. So although I am a teacher and my husband is a teacher, I coached my children through the 11 plus, because now it's the 11 plus, and all 3 of my children went to grammar school. One of them is still there. One's just left, and one left 2 years ago. And I don't think it's been a productive, positive experience for any of them. And yet I fell into that same trap. And I probably did it because when I was younger, I wasn't good enough to go. And so when my first child came along, as when you're new parents, you want the best for your children, I thought that was the best thing for him. So they're all clever kids, so it wasn't difficult to kind of coach, but obviously the test is a certain way, and so you have to be able to answer the test. You don't get taught it at school.
Well, and that's one of the things, isn't it? Often, I think it's like you do a driving test, you don't really learn how to drive until you afterwards.
Absolutely.
And we're getting to the point where my kids went to a great school in many ways, bad in others, but they were really prescriptively trained on how to pass the exams. More than the subjects. So, I mean, they did learn the subjects, but they become masters of exactly what was coming. They knew what type of questions. They even knew the type of rotation of questions. So they were masters of passing tests, not necessarily passionate, interested, knowledgeable about the subject.
But what I didn't take into consideration was my first son and my youngest son are probably a bit more like their dad, quite laid back, quite relaxed. And so the grammar system worked for them. They they didn't fight against it. They just gone with it. My middle son's a bit more like me and is a bit more doesn't like to be told, is a bit more of a maverick, and I think they couldn't wait to see the back of him. His time at school, he's made some really lovely friends. So he's got a really great group of friends, but I think that's the only thing he would tell you was any good about his schooling. He couldn't wait to leave and absolutely hated every minute of it because he was put in this box.
And what age is he now?
He's just left. Yeah, he's just left. So he's 16, and he
can do an apprenticeship.
He did so he wanted to do an apprenticeship, but contrary to what people think, that's really not very easy. And so we've managed to get him an electrical apprenticeship, which he's been doing now for 4 weeks. He gets up at 4:30 every morning. He rides his bike down to the pub where they pick him up, and he comes back at 5 o'clock at night. He's done a hard day, goes to bed by 9 every night, and he loves it. And I think the disappointing thing is his teachers are never going to see him like that, and they didn't bring that out of him, and it won't be celebrated in any way, which I think is really sad.
And I mean, it may be harder for you to have an opinion on it, but do you think it's wrong that we put the pressure on children that if they don't go to uni, they're not as successful? We make them feel like failures if they don't go to uni. Is that
absolutely.
Is that fair, and is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So my eldest went to the same school, stayed on, did A-levels, then followed the suit and went to university. And I encouraged it, even though I knew it wasn't the right thing for him. I encouraged it because I wanted him to live his life and go and experience things and all the things I remembered about my wild days at university, when actually it isn't quite like that anymore because you've got social media and it's very different. So I was
get away with it then.
Yeah, I was living through it thinking it would be like when I was there, and it wasn't the same. And he lasted 3 months and hated every minute of it. came home, and I've never had so many people say to me, "I'm so sorry. Like, are you okay?" I was like, "Well, yeah, because I've got my son home. Of course I'm okay." And he's happy
and if
now.
they're saying that to you,
yeah,
you can imagine the pressure on the
of
young
course.
adults themselves who are thinking, "I've failed. I've given up." You know,
and he doesn't feel like that because he's got two parents.
No, but society tries to make you.
The only reason he doesn't feel like that is because he's got two parents who were completely confident in his decision making and said we'd support him no matter what.
Yeah.
And actually, he's now got a good job that he's learning on the job, and that's going really well for him. And I can see him blossoming. He makes money online doing things and all sorts of stuff. And he is a bit entrepreneurial, and I think he'll be fine. But you're absolutely right. Society does make us feel like we're not good enough if we don't, and especially the school system we've got in Kent being a selective system. If you don't stay on and do A-levels and you don't go to university, other than that, you're not really in the running for any kind of celebration of your successes.
It's like, all right then.
You're kind of substandard.
It is. Well, and often when I speak at schools, it's normally about 6 months before they do GCSEs or 6 months before A-levels. And I talk a bit about micro goal setting, and 15 minutes a day for the next 6 months can change your grade. A grade can open the door. And we get into this. But then often in the wrap-up, and I'll say what I'm going to say, but I'll look then at the teachers or the parents who are often there in this sort of opening. And I say, look, a really important thing is I want you to ignore your parents, and I want you to ignore your teachers, and I want you to ignore society, because you need to find your passion. Yeah. And I use the example of Mick Jagger, who's 80 this year, and is still performing. I mean, the energy that guy's got is amazing. But I say, go back when he was 15, 16. We're talking about 65 years ago. So what would that have been? 1960. He's there with his mum and dad, and he says, "I'm going to be a rock star." You can imagine it. Oh,
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Don't be stupid. Get a proper job.
Yeah.
And there's all these pressures. And you can imagine, he's a funny looking bloke, isn't he? But it's amazing. But you say, you got a face for radio and you can't bloody dance or sing kind of thing. So don't be stupid. Yeah. And now, if he did listen to his parents, because if today our kid said, "I want to be a rock star," I'd be, "Oh God, I'm going to be looking after him till he's 40 or whatever it is." But when people follow their passion, even if they don't achieve monetary success or success in the way that society wraps it up, they live every day doing something they love. Whereas if their mum and dad say, "You've got to be a bank manager," and they become a bank manager, they may make plenty of money but hate every day. And so what is it? We were talking a little bit just before about success. How do you define success for yourself, but also for kids? If you were saying at the end of their time at Rowans, what do I want to give them as a message to pursue for the rest of their life?
I think we want to give back in the world, don't we? So it's not all about taking. So I think we've got to leave our mark on the world, and it's got to be positive. So it doesn't matter what job you do, it doesn't matter how much money you make, it doesn't matter as long as what you're doing, I think, makes a positive contribution to society. For me, I absolutely love my job, which most people would say it's a bit mental, because my job it has its moments. There are times when, and the people I work with would tell you that I laugh a lot, and I laugh even when there's a really serious situation. You will always find me laughing, because I say to them, "Look, no one's died. We're all alive. Everyone's safe. Let's look at the positives around these." But I think there's so much emphasis on doing A-levels, going to university, doing this a certain pathway. It doesn't matter what pathway you choose, as long as what you're doing makes you happy. And we talk about wealth, don't we? And what is wealth? And it isn't about being rich. It isn't about financially being rich. Money does make you happy, because if you can't afford to eat, you're not happy. If you can't afford to pay your mortgage, you're not happy. So there's a certain standard of wage that we all want to be able to earn. But I don't think it has to be the same for everybody, and everyone's going to have their difference. My middle son is happy. It doesn't matter what he does, he's happy. Whereas the part of me, I'm not content. There's always something else I'm looking for. It doesn't matter what I earn. It doesn't matter what I do. I always want to do something else. I'm looking for it. So part of that's about our personalities, isn't it?
And it absolutely is. And I often talk about my younger brother, who basically lives the life he wants to live. So he's very happy in that sense. I also know a lot of very wealthy people who are very unhappy.
Yeah.
And even if they're not unhappy, they're unsatisfied. It's like, they're 65, 70 and they're still going for it. I love that ambition. But weaved in among the ambition is a not satisfied. Yeah. Weaved in amongst the not satisfied is not content. And you start to look and think, like you say, I go and speak at some of the I've spoken at amazing schools in terms of qualification and in terms of cost and fees and facilities. I go to some challenge schools. There's a lot more laughter in the challenge schools. You know, in the paid schools, they're very serious. I'm not saying they don't build good friendships, but they come out like scared because they know they've still got this Everest to climb, as opposed to, I've finished education now, what do I want to do?
But then that is the school system, isn't it? So we're really lucky in alternative provision because we can't really do anything wrong. I mean, we've worked really hard. We're one of very few outstanding in all areas under recent inspection for Ofsted. And although Ofsted's not the major marker for everybody, it is what people know and understand to be a kind of measure of success for a school. But within that, we are free to do things that perhaps you're not free to do in mainstream. We've got the capacity to do things that you can't do in mainstream.
What sort of things?
Just we're a bit freer with our curriculum, the way in which we teach. We don't prescribe certain methodologies. All teachers are free to experiment and do their own thing. We've got much smaller class sizes.
Why? So the class size is a big thing, I think. Certainly, if you look at private schools to public or state,
yeah, of course,
they're much smaller. But if you can see and feel and evidence the positive of you as a school, as teachers within the school, having a bit more freedom on curriculum, why is that not being taken back to state and saying, we've found that if we get a bit more freedom, and I saw that you sort of build contracts with the kids and they sign up to what they're trying to achieve and so on. That clearly works, and I've seen some of the different things around schools similar. Why is that not going back to the state system? Why is it becoming, it feels to me, and I'm interested in viewing it, why is it becoming ever more rigid, not less so?
Yeah, I think, so an example is my son, my youngest son, who's at the same school as the other two went to, he can't take business as a GCSE this year because they can't find any business teachers. So that curriculum's got narrower. That's what he wanted to do. He now can't do it. It doesn't mean he can't do it later on, but he can't do it at the moment. They've just chosen their options. There is a recruitment crisis in schools. We can't get teachers. I think it's 25% of newly qualified teachers, or early career teachers as they're now called, leave the profession within 2 years. Yeah. The workload, people talk about, you get all these holidays. But what they don't understand is that teachers are going in, they're doing 12-hour days, 5 days a week. Yeah. So behaviour in schools has got more and more challenging. The head teachers, mainstream head teachers that I work with in our local area, they are on their knees. It is tough. It's tougher than it's ever been. And yet government policy isn't reflecting that. We've got an education secretary who's just come out on Twitter to say about us going on strike and, how many days were lost to children's education. And, well, if they'd have been paid properly in the first place, then they wouldn't have needed to go on strike. It's the same for all the other people. Yeah. We get given a 6% pay rise, but it's not fully funded. So that comes out. So that comes out of what we've currently got in our funding, and therefore there are cuts all over the place. So children that have got additional needs don't get the same support in a mainstream school, yet we're pushing all of these children with additional needs into mainstream school because it's cheaper. Yeah.
I mean, something you were talking there about, whatever percentage was it?
Leaving it's 25% 2 years? 25%. About, I think, in the first 2 years.
So first 2 years.
Early career teachers, yeah.
And, of course, education's one of those things that everyone's an expert in. Fred down the pub and Mary in the coffee, whatever it is. They're all experts. They all know, that's because they're bloody this and whatever. And they all have an opinion. But if you had to try and put, from your experience actually in that environment, what are the 3 things that make them leave? Because everyone will say it's just money, the greedy buggers or whatever, but it's not just that.
No.
If you had to say it's mostly this, and then it's that, and then it's this, what would those 3 things be? That they come in, they clearly wanted to be a teacher,
of course.
Studied, did the courses to qualify, and within 2 years they hate it. What is it? So
I think, and I don't know if this is controversial or not, but they've been to university and they've got themselves into quite an amount of debt. Okay, they then start, and we're now pushing first year teachers' wages up to 30 grand. Which is a decent enough wage. I'm not criticising that, but you're never going to be rich if you're a teacher. Right. So you're prepared to put the work in. You work hard. Everybody works hard that takes their job seriously. But actually, the workload and the pressures So because of the pressures that we have in terms of the measures of success, so the Progress 8 measures were out last week for secondary schools, and it's a league table of schools.
Yeah.
And all over Twitter, it's those that are kind of, parading around saying they've got the best ones. And of course, if there's a top of the list, there's a bottom of the list. And every year, teachers look at their own results. So I'm a French teacher, and what did my class get in their GCSEs this year? And if they don't do well, that's a direct impact. I'm measured on that, so I'm accountable.
Is that not reasonable?
It is reasonable, but then you're not taking into consideration other factors. So, for example, pupil attendance. So since COVID, we've got the lowest pupil attendance in the country that we've ever had. So if the child's not attending your lessons, they're not learning. So that's
not your fault. Then.
No. Behaviour, that's quite difficult. Lots of disruptive behaviour in classes. One teacher with 32 children who some of them might not want to learn, some of them might not want to be there, some of them have got additional needs and they can't manage in that classroom. They need something different, but they can't have something different because that's not what the system is. The system is, this is the menu, we're dishing this menu up, and whatever happens, you need to do it. So if you look at all different angles, the children...
So they're getting an okay wage.
Yeah.
They almost can't win because they're expected to do well, but system's against them a little bit.
What support do they get as young teachers? And it's not a national situation, that. It depends on each school. So leadership in schools is really important, isn't it? If you've got great leaders, then your staff are going to feel supported and that their welfare matters. If you don't have great leaders, then perhaps everyone's in it. I mean, there's a school local to us who it's judged inadequate, and it's been inadequate for quite a few years now. They're actually doing something about it. They're going to split the school and do some stuff with it. But teachers, one of my friend's sons went there as a newly qualified teacher and he dropped out. So he's now not in teaching at all. Now, my argument to her was, let's get him a different job in another school because he'll love it. He wants to be a PE teacher.
But he was tarnished then.
But then he didn't want to go back because he'd had such poor experiences. And it wasn't just poor experiences with children. It was poor experiences with leadership, workload, not enough guidance, children and their behaviours and their expectations, and to some extent their entitlement.
So your school's outstanding in all areas, award-winning. Mm-hmm. You're award-winning head. Mm-hmm. You don't like the recognition. But I'm saying this more to build up to, clearly you're doing a lot right and you're helping people.
Yeah.
What is it that you are doing differently, better or best relative to other schools? Because this to me is where other heads, other teachers, other schools, maybe some MPs, if you listen to the podcast, and maybe they should get into some schools. But what is it you're doing differently, better, best that is making your school outstanding in every area, award-winning, and producing kids that have come to you more challenged than most but leave better?
It's probably a little bit like comparing apples and pears, though. So you can't really compare alternative provision as an education with mainstream. That wouldn't be fair. So I can't say that what we're doing in our school comparatively to mainstream, because they can't do it any differently. They are doing the best they can do, and it's really tough. It's really difficult. The situation is difficult. I think we go around schools and we do lots of training. So we've just done some training in a local primary school last week, and it was about the power of relationships. And I think that's massively important. I don't think there's enough. So we talked earlier about...
Between teacher and student.
Yeah. So the power and importance of human connection.
Yeah.
And we talked about Rita Pearson, and children don't learn from
teachers they
don't like. And if I talk to my own children, who perhaps you could say that working in a grammar school, you've got different pressures, because generally the children are better behaved, and there aren't as many challenges potentially as there are compared to the other mainstream schools. They don't have relationships with most of their teachers.
And so, I want to get into this a bit because, and I've talked as a doctor of education about, I'd often say to people, what was your favourite subject?
Yeah.
Oh, maths or sport. Why was that? A teacher made it really interesting. I really liked the teacher. So the reverse of we can't learn from teachers we don't like is our best experiences and our best learning comes from teachers that we do like. Mm. Why is it that so many schools aren't actively fostering, developing, trying to improve those relationships? Is it because they're scared if they get close to a pupil, they'll be called a paedophile, or because it does seem to be getting less, the connection seems to be distancing.
I think some of it's time constraints and it's additional pressures. So I'm your French teacher, your business teacher, and I don't want to. I haven't got time to worry about what you're doing at the weekend, or how's mum at home, or because I've got to get your grade. That's the most important thing. It's about your grade. So I think we've lost something along the way. And at the Rowans, we don't have to do that because we have fewer people, fewer kids in class, more time with them. We do less options. So they might take, in a mainstream school, you might take 12 GCSEs and we might do 7. Yeah. So you've got more curriculum time. And we're not judged on the same measures as mainstream schools are, so it's easier for us to do that.
But is that you not wanting to take all the kudos?
No,
for some of what, or because surely you got. I mean, look, if you've got 30 kids, just like if you've got 300 employees, the opportunity to connect with all of them exists. Some don't want that connection. Yeah. Some actively move away from that connection. But some are kind of crying out for some connection. And chances are, if they're crying out from it, it's because, they've got problems at home or they don't feel loved. And I'm not saying teachers should give them love, but recognition. They say babies cry for it, soldiers die for it. We all need some recognition. And I noticed it was a core part of the values and the way that you work. We're teaching teachers to teach a subject. We're teaching them about controls. We're teaching them about structure, framework, curriculum. Shouldn't we also be giving them more leadership, guidance, training on looking for connection in So
we've talked lots with our local teacher training provider about how all newly qualified or early career teachers need to come into alternative provision. And we do have a relationship with our local university to come and spend at least a week with us. And it really helps because they get to see it from the other side. Yeah. And I think before I went to work at the Rowans, it was 15 years ago, I didn't know it existed. I was in charge of behaviour in a mainstream school and lots of children were permanently excluded from my guidance to the head teacher. It's like it can only be the head teacher's decision, but ultimately it was me providing him with the information. Not once did I think where they went or even was that bothered about it. Now I see the other side of it and I've worked with it for 15 years. Actually, we need to do a lot more education in mainstream schools with mainstream staff about the power of connection, relationships. We've got behaviour policies, but we should have behaviour and relationship policies that actually you get more out of a child if you've got a relationship, if you connect with them. All of that is really rich and important. Yeah. And I don't think we do enough about that. We go around mainstream schools now and we're doing lots of work on trauma-informed practice and ACEs and windows of tolerance of children and how you can connect with a child and where is the right place you can connect with a child, because lots of school staff don't understand that if a child's moved out of their window of tolerance where you are at your peak performance and they're either in hyperarousal or hypoarousal, our staff in schools are trying to manage the behaviours up here when actually you've got to connect before
teach two extremes at once.
You've got to connect before you can correct. You can't correct a behaviour until you can connect with the person because they're not listening to you. So I think there's a lot of education with that perhaps early career teachers or even teachers that have been in the profession a long time could really do with reflecting on and understanding. But what that doesn't do is change the fact they're not resourced well enough.
Yeah, no, and so just on all of that and the final point about not resourced well enough, we in business you try some stuff and let's say it's a product, it sells or it doesn't sell. You do or don't connect with customers. If it's not working, you look at what is working, what isn't working, you change it. Yeah. And you evolve all the time, so it improves. From what you were just saying, I was thinking it sounds like you've had some experience, or the school system has had some experience, knows that you got to connect to correct, and some of these sort of obvious, really, when you think about it, learning from teachers who you like, and then it becomes a more positive upward spiral because the teacher then is getting more from it because the teacher knows they're helping more and it's this kind of positive. Why isn't that being taken back and changing the way that schools are working then?
Should be, shouldn't it? I mean, it would be nice to have an education secretary who'd actually been a head teacher.
Thanks for listening to Success is a System. We release a new episode every fortnight with fantastic guests. For more great content, like, subscribe and share. See you all next time on Success is a System.
Because at the moment, and perhaps anyone could say that about any, various different ministers, but we we've had a series of education ministers who, quite frankly, aren't really in touch with reality, are they? I mean, when Gavin Williamson was Minister of Education, he tweeted that he'd been to this high power, great school, blah, blah, blah. And I retweeted it and said, come and visit us.
Did you hear
Of course not. We don't get visited, do we? Because these children don't exist. These children, they're not...
Listen, I'll come. Invite me along. You wouldn't want me back there.
But this isn't where people want to be seen to be, is it? They don't want to be seen
but
to...
they should. They should.
Yeah,
What about the
100%
Shadow Education Secretary? Have they taught or had any experience?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Because they're probably going to be the education secretary.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, the reality is, whether we like it or not, wherever our politics is, it's probably going to change. And that in thinking about today, that made me think, should education be outside of government, in the sense that every time there's a change of government, there's probably going to be a change of educational policy. Every time there's a change of educational policy, you've got to suddenly adjust, and your other teachers in all schools have got to adjust based on some new rules. Should, in the same way we say, okay, it's the public service, so we outsource it, but the civil service run it, but the civil service remains constant. May or may not like them, but it seems to me it's too risky when you've got opposing parties that almost will change for change's sake.
I mean, we've now got this idea, haven't we, that we do maths post 16 till we're 18, which is laughable, really, because they haven't got enough maths. But they haven't got enough maths teachers to teach the kids that we've currently got. And what is it useful maths? So, I remember my middle son, who's just done his GCSEs, came home and for him, he looked a little bit down. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, I really couldn't do that exam. And he's a bright kid. Yeah. And when we looked at the paper, the questions that had come out on social media, it's not maths that is going to... I mean, he's an electrician. He's now got... There's
not any practical application.
No, he doesn't need to know circle theorems and how, and I don't know, exactly, and the problem... So they're not necessarily maths problems. They are linguistic problems with a bit of maths in them. So we've lost a little bit of sight of functional maths, functional English, banking.
And how it's going to be useful in
skills that you need, later on in life, perhaps.
So one of the big things at the moment, I got into a bit of a social media spat about Angela Rayner a couple of weeks ago. Because I went to this school that, as I said to you, was called a demonised depository for social waste. My girls went to a brilliant private school, and I don't mind saying it. It had its own challenges, don't get me wrong, and there were things about it I would not want them to go back and experience. But she says, we're just going to ban state, or we're going to charge 20% VAT on state schools. They're already 38 grand or whatever, so now it's going to be like 40 something thousand. And I looked at that and thought, I can't remember the numbers now, but it was like 500,000 kids or something are now going to be forced back into the state system, or whatever proportion. And I also thought, having gone to the school where I sent my kids, probably 30 to 40% of the parents in there, they weren't silver spoon parents, they weren't wealthy parents, they were going without holidays, they were selling the car, they were moving from London to Lincolnshire to be able to afford to put their kids through that, because they just, rightly or wrongly, thought that'll give them a better start. And yet, she is an MP, just like all other MPs, got no idea, sort of says, she's so against anyone from a private school, anyone from a good upbringing and so on. And I can see it both sides, I really can. I've been in poverty, I've had money. I went to a terrible school, my kids went to a good school. But do you have an opinion on private schools versus state schools? Should we only have one system? Should we aspire to raise all schools up to that? What's your view on that?
I don't have a problem with private schools. My husband works in a private school, so our conversations around the dinner table...
What's his name?
Darren. Our conversations around the dinner table of school experiences are fairly vast. So he works in a private school, I work where I work. The boys have gone through
so you really do understand the differences.
So we've got all of these kind of things going on. And sometimes we'll share anecdotal stories, and his are obviously extremely difficult to mine. He laughs sometimes as Henrietta lost her clarinet, or whatever it might be that was today's, massive issue. Whereas it might be a little bit more serious in my kind of field of work. But I think if people want to pay for their children to go to private school, and private schools are there, it's the same as anything else, isn't it? I've got a private dentist. I pay to go and have my teeth done at a private dentist. I'm not National Health. So I think the choice is okay. I think we should all have the choice to do it. No, exactly, I think the choice is, I think we should have the choice to do it. Are they better? I think, as you've said, there are things that create more problems with them sometimes.
Some kids come out more messed up.
Yeah, absolutely. I would get rid of the grammar system. I think that's a massive issue for our authorities.
Because it's creating division in that,
Yeah. And you don't get a good cross section of society. There are a certain type of young person fits in I can only talk boys' grammar school, but in an all boys grammar school, a certain type of young man fits in that environment and is well catered for and excels. And my children haven't fit that mould, especially my middle one, who actively fought against that mould. So.
And you were saying how you worked hard to help them.
Yeah, it was a nightmare.
And I know a lot of parents who I would meet at my daughter's school, literally they put them through tutoring to get them into the entrance exams and everything else. Some people say you shouldn't have to do that because if you have to do that, they probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But equally, my argument is sort of saying, but are you saying parents shouldn't be involved in the education? Because there's two different things going on here. Because my wife and I used to do this sort of story before bed and what homework have they got? Not to do the homework for them, but a parent has a really, in my view, really important role in the education of their children. If they don't, they might be looking after them forever anyway. But to what degree do you see parents helping children, your school, your kid's school, your husband's school? And is there a kind of message that we individually, but as a nation, need to be saying, you have a responsibility, parents, this is what you should do to help your children? Or do you think you should say, no, just pass them over, we'll look after it?
Probably some and some. Not all parents have got the capacity to be able to support.
Yeah.
So cognitively or financially or whatever that capacity might be. I managed to get my first son. They're all three of them are quite clever boys. So they weren't out of their depth academically being in the grammar school. But because the first one went, I had to make the second and third one. Had to have the same. For me, they had to have the same opportunity. What I didn't think was, is this the right opportunity? Because if I'd have asked myself that question, no, it wasn't the right thing for the second one. So I've been a parent as they've grown up. You don't want to do your homework, don't do it. I think you should do it, and if you want help with it, I'll support you. But I'm not going to check your homework. I'm not going to sit and make you do it, because they've got to have some form of intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
Children that don't have their own intrinsic motivation won't ever go on to lead successful, happy lives, because they'll always look to the next person. And we've also got a generation of entitled kids, haven't we?
Yeah.
So
They're abused if they haven't got a phone.
Yeah. And I do think there are some parents that don't pay enough attention, and maybe there are the kind of parents that hover over their kids and pay too much attention.
What is the best way you think parents can support? I mean, because they might have the capacity to teach or to be actively involved in that sense. But what's the best support a parent can give a child through schooling, do you think?
I think modelling. So actually, I work really hard. My husband works hard. So in our household, I said to my 14-year-old, he's just turned 14. I said, when you turn 14, you have to do football refereeing. And he looked at me because he's very quiet and quite shy. Yeah. And it was like, it was awful. He just didn't know what to say to me. And I said, everybody works in this house, George. And when you turn 14, the first you can go and referee. So all of you football referee, that's the first job you have. So Dad's going to enrol you on that course and you're going to do it. I think that's really important, that we model the fact that you have to stand on your own 2 feet. You do have to go and get your first job when you can. And that you emotionally support your kids as well. Because actually, mental health is a massive issue, isn't it? And social media is a massive issue, and it causes lots of mental health issues and stuff. And I think if we can eat dinner together every night, talk about, not what have you done today and everyone goes on the table, but generally have nice conversations about stuff, maybe bring up what's going on in the world, have an understanding of the world around us, and we do that through that kind of family unit stuff. That's probably the best support we can give our kids, and that's breaking down. Not everyone has that.
One of the things I think, I didn't always agree with her, but my wife was completely right on, our girls are 21 and 24, is every meal is at the table.
Yeah, same.
I mean, they're 21, 24, we never eat meals on our laps.
No, never, nor do we.
And I think, bloody hell, let's watch a movie. But it's only like 40 minutes, maybe an hour if you get chatty on stuff. Yeah. But you do chat because, and she was no phones at the table as well. So
absolutely, same rule.
Bloody hell, she's a nightmare. But we've been together 35 years, so it's all good. But on that made me think about, have your kids all got phones?
Yeah.
There's been chat lately, hasn't there, about phones being taken off kids when they go into school and given back at the end of the day. What's your thoughts on that one?
So we take them off them in our school and they get put in a safe in the morning. And we do that because if we don't do it, it causes untold problems all throughout the day. But because we're smaller school and because of the additional problems that our young people face, that works really well. My husband was telling me...
It can't be easy because you've got kids who have probably been violent or like have tendency to speak their mind.
Of course.
And yet people say we can't take the phones off from them. In ordinary schools, it works. It's okay.
Well, I mean, they don't always give them over willingly, but we won't let it go. So that's the school rule, and we don't have a huge amount of school rules.
And what if they're caught with one? Because I know my daughters, they're not at school now, but they would have their phones collected in, so they'd have one that they could give away, an old burner one or something, and then they'd keep the secret one.
But then that boils down to relationship. So in our school, we've got a form tutor who's got the best relationship with her children or his children. They don't very often lie to their form tutor because they value that relationship, because that's the one person that they know is going to help them. You know, if I come along and I say to them, come on, you know, you said you haven't got a phone, we know you have. They know that I'm going to help them when they've got a problem. So they generally don't want to let you down. So
you as the head, executive head, how do you measure the degree of connection and relationship that teachers have with the kids? I mean, because you know you want it to be as deep as it can be so that there is that trust, there is that kind of contract almost. But how do you know if the teachers have got that or haven't got that with all the kids? So for us, it's children making positive choices. So when the kids are making positive choices, they want to be in lessons. When a child comes to us and they're new, it takes them a little while to become Rowanised because they're a bit like, well, why are they doing that? Why are these kids going to the lesson? Why are they? Because they've been so used to arguing and fighting against it, and now they're with all these children that they might know through social media or through their school that they would have seen arguing and fighting, and now they're quite happily going along their day. So I think for me, it's about how the school is day to day. It's a calm place. It's a happy place. There's lots of laughter. We've got a huge social media presence. We've got Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and we've never had one negative comment posted by anybody on any of those platforms in the last 10 years. And for me, don't start writing on my... So for me, that speaks volumes. Our parents, our relationships with our parents, and we do the same usual things everyone else does in terms of surveying it and stuff. But our parents are with us 100%. Great. So you've seen, as you say, your kid's been through state standard grammar. Your husband's private school, and I think it's a great sort of blend. And you're an alternative provision school. If there were three things if you were the education secretary, what three things would you change in education in the UK? Okay. I would... it's got to be financial to start with. There's not enough money in mainstream education in schools. So they don't have the funding to offer the level of support for the children that need the support. And we end up paying the price later anyway, don't we? Exactly. So we talk about inclusion all the time, and government actually gives us the tools in mainstream school to exclude children. So the policy and allows schools to exclude children that disrupt other people's learning or who are dangerous or violent, whatever. Once that's happened, they come out, they cost a lot of money. Yeah. If they can stay in alternative provision short term and then go back, they cost less money. If they stay longer or they get an education, health and care plan and they go into special, they cost a lot of money. If we don't support kids early on and they leave school and they're involved in crime... Was it £2 billion a year? They cost us even more money. So that early intervention work, there's got to be a lot of money. And with the new Green Paper, there is that's the talk of there being a 3-tier system, an early intervention. But there needs to be money that follows that early intervention. At the same time as still dealing with all this that's happening, because you can't just put all the money in. And it's cost justified by what it saves after school and... Yeah, but what they're talking about doing is we take all the money out of here, up the top, and we put it in the bottom. You can't take it off the top to start with. You've got to do it both ways, haven't you? Because you've got to stem the flow. Make it worse. Exactly. So I think that's the first thing. I think I put resource in so that intervention can happen with children to keep more children in school and be successful. I think our system of supporting children when they leave at the age of 16 and the fact that we are hell-bent on getting 5s and above in maths, English and all our other GCSEs is wrong because we don't value anything. We don't have enough funding in schools or enough recruitment
work going to recruitment to have engineers, DT teachers. So lots of schools are cutting subjects like that, vocational subjects.
They're only left with the academic.
Yes. There's not enough vocational, the arts, things like that. That actually, why are we not putting, onus on that? Why is it always so academic?
And yet I say that I do public speaking and different things, and I say that the most important subject for me at school was drama. I was taught to improvise. I was taught to project my voice. I was taught to kind of, if I'm feeling sad, I could act happy, and the more I acted happy, the more I became happy. The acting was really important, and the other thing was the arts. And a lot of people think arts is all loves and the wealthy people and ballet and all that stuff, but it's not. It's about expression. It's about connection with something that calms your mind down and everything else. So, and I went to this terrible school, but those two things stood out for me as really powerful, and I see them somehow being seen as wishy-washy, kind of superfluous.
And then I think the third thing I'd do is value it. I don't think
value the education.
Value education, value teachers as a profession, listen, actually really understand. Even people in local government or, local council, they don't really understand what's going on in schools. You can't talk about schools unless you spend time in a school. So, So should business and school come together? When I was at school, we did, I think it was called Trident or something, where we set up a little business, run it for a year, the last year or something, and then sell some products or something. What was that called? It was like a work experience thing. Not YTS or something, was it?
No, it wasn't going out to a job. It was in school. We set up. Anyway, my brain's gone clearly. But business and education. I got an award at school for fostering better relationship between business and education with different things. But businesses tend to shy away from it. Oh, you get them educated, and then if they're good enough,
exactly. But are we producing what business needs? So in schools...
They would say no.
Yeah, no, we're not though, are we?
Yeah.
And my child is a prime example of that, because he went to a grammar school, he did all academic subjects, he was encouraged to drop 2 of them just before he took the exams, because he wasn't going to do them it was arts and French, and he wasn't going to do them very well. I mean, I did say to him, do not tell your teachers I speak fluent French, because you can't drop that, and that's a bit embarrassing. So he's encouraged to drop 2, got academic qualifications, so 7s and 6s in physics and chemistry, but he just wants to be an electrician.
Yeah,
but what did we do throughout school? I organised his work experience, and he did 2 lots of work experience that I organised with electricians. But what did the school system do to help him follow what he wanted to do and follow his? But they've done nothing. I've done it. They've done nothing to help. The school system's done nothing.
And my brain goes all over. We literally got a couple of minutes left. But careers teachers. I find it strange that careers teachers are teaching about careers, but they probably haven't had a career other than being a careers teacher.
Exactly.
So should we change that?
Yeah, 100%.
Because, I mean, a good example, my daughter was incredible, the second one, both of them, but the second one was incredibly academic and interested in psychology and different things, but she was also an amazing musician. So she goes and sees the careers officer or whatever they're called, and, what do you do? I do this, I do it. The minute they heard music, I should be a musician. It's like, it's just lazy. And actually, she actively didn't want to be a musician because she was terrified that if she did that as a job, she would then only be able to do that as a job, and it would take away something she had a passion for that she didn't want. She wanted to have as a pleasure, not as a
that's right.
business.
But why hasn't this school that my 3 children have been to got all these connections with plumbers and electricians, and at the end of year 11, they're saying to these businesses that they've got these great links with because they're a school that's been there for years and years and years and years with a really great reputation, really well thought of. Why have they not got these links so that at the end of the year they say, I've got 3 boys that are going to be brilliant plumbers. I've got 3 boys that are going to, because they don't value it.
Well, either that, or I'm not sure the education system encourages or allows it. So, I mentor 30 trades, a lot of them are electricians and plumbers. Charlie Mullins wants to be a UK ambassador for apprenticeships and get people into apprenticeship and start to say, look, if you don't want to go to uni, it certainly isn't right for many people, especially if you've got anywhere on that spectrum. But you could be an amazing person as a plumber or an electrician, and you'll probably be employed forever if you are, because I ain't going to fix lights, and I ain't going to plumb a tap kind of thing. So, and actually it can be quite fun. I think a lot of businesses don't realise that they could be more actively involved in schools. I mean, if a business in your area came to you and said, we always need 5 plumbers a year, can we come in and talk about plumbing to your 5th form of that? you'd
Yeah,
encourage
and
it.
schools would do it. They're just not going out and finding it. And I think the plumber, the company that got my son, I think they've won the lottery because he's a clever kid and he wants to do it. We at school now, we're trying to get some money because we'd like to open our own little coffee shop, so that we can teach every single one of our kids that's coming through our system a barista qualification.
Brilliant,
which means that when they leave, they can go and work in a coffee shop. Now, I understand that for some people that's not highbrow enough, but for the kids that are coming through my school, that could make the complete world difference. But how do I do it? Where do I get that from? That's really hard.
We could work together on that. Speak to one of the big brands, because they would probably love the association as well. My daughter, during one of her summers, did a Starbucks job on the train station at Peterborough. I mean, she's now got a master's in cognitive neuroscience and doing psychology. But she still says, one day I'll have a coffee shop. Because, yes, she can do this. She does do that. It pays really well. But two things that came out of her working at a coffee shop, she said, you learn so much about people, Dad.
Yeah.
You get to know them. You get to learn customer service. And there's a real art to the barista art and all this sort. Really good. Getting a coffee shop. And she'll say, oh, they've killed the bloody espresso or whatever, because if they get the temperatures wrong and different things. And she said, the second thing is, people work really hard in that coffee shop, but they can't afford a flat. They have to sofa surf, because minimum wage for doing a job like that is pathetic. So separately, we have a bit of a rant often about minimum wage. It needs to be a livable wage and so on. But one last thing. What's the worst thing about education in the UK? Are you still proud of it? Do you think we as a country should be proud about it? And what's the best thing about education in the UK?
I think the worst thing is the constant competition between schools, league tables, who's doing better, who's not doing better, who's the best head, who's not the best head, who's got the worst kids, reputation of this school, that school, you don't want to go there, it's not good enough, all of that. I think we could just stop beating it over the head with a stick. That would be helpful. Oh God,
so less measurement, less testing.
Your kid goes to an alternative provision, that must be horrific. Yeah. And you speak to all of the parents of children that come to my school, and they're over the moon their kids are with me and my head, because that's, for the first time ever, they feel they're being successful. So
and
let's not...
Someone's listening as
well.
well.
Yeah, so let's not beat the system over the head. So that's the worst thing. What's the best thing? I don't know.
Struggling.
I think you've got a
Reasons
whole
to be
load...
cheerful.
I think you've got a whole load of people who have literally made it their life's work to put back into schools. I'm so proud of all of my staff in my school. The head teacher who runs the Rowans, Fiona, is an amazing head teacher. Her staff are incredible. All my staff that work with all my primary kids, our outreach workers, they're all incredible. The people we meet in mainstream schools. Yeah. And, actually, I am proud to be a teacher. And I think there are a lot of wonderful people in the profession. So I think that's something that we should celebrate more.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Caron. And I would say to anyone who's watching or listening, check out the Rowans Academy. Look on the website, because just even the way the teachers introduce themselves is quite different to what I'd ever experienced. Here's Mrs. Johnson. Look, it's a nice, relatable thing. Talks about
that's
the
from
fact
my
that
primary
you've got
school, though.
Yeah, but the point being, it's not overly academic. It's not like trying to. A bit like you were saying about earlier about some people I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, and rather than trying to say, actually, I'm just a normal person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who cares? But listen, if you've enjoyed, like, share, subscribe, and if you're a business, maybe get to your local school and ask them what you can do to foster better relationships between education and business. And you never know, you might find someone who could be your next best employee or a future leader for the UK. Thanks very much. We look forward to seeing you on another edition of Success as a System.